The Stories That Shaped Us is a limited series podcast by the National School Public Relations Association. Produced in celebration of NSPRA's 90th anniversary, these voices, these stories seek to honor the legacy of NSPRA and explore the evolving role of school communicators and the future of the profession.
So much has changed, and so much has stayed the same. As we look through the eras of NSPRA's 90-year history, we trace the tools and technology that we have carried as school communications experts. And we marvel at how technology and expectations have evolved over time. Now, while the tools and tactics have changed, the heart of the work remains consistent. This is The Stories That Shaped Us podcast. Hello, my name is Mitchell Rausch, and I'm fortunate to serve as the Communications Director for Grand Island Public Schools in the heartland of Nebraska. And I've been tapped by NSPRA as a fellow school PR pro to journey through this podcast alongside influential voices in the industry and alongside you, our listeners. So in this episode, we'll explore how school communicators have adapted to shifting tools, platforms, and technologies across the decades. And we'll see how NSPRA played a role in helping members stay current through trends, all the trends like cable TV, desktop publishing, websites, social media, and now AI. We'll hear from Nicole Kirby, APR, and Carol Mackey, and Andy Grunig, APR, each of them a trailblazer in their own right, both in terms of leadership and in the disruptive technology tools they've adopted to vault the work of school communications into new eras. Nicole, Carol, and Andy will help us look at the how behind much of our work in school PR. Because while the mediums have changed, the mission hasn't. This is The Stories That Shaped Us podcast, Episode 4, The Tools We Carried.
My name is Nicole Kirby, and I'm a senior strategist with CISO Communications. This is the start of my 27th year in school communications. I worked for 23 years in the Park Hill School District in the Kansas City area before coming over to CISO. And so now I'm still doing school communications and just helping a lot of different districts around the country.
Nicole Kirby, APR, makes public schools and school communications better. As a relator and a strategic thinker and an early adopter, she's found herself at the forefront of a big movement towards shaping community conversations through 21st century technology. Throughout her 27-year career in school PR, she's influenced districts all across the country as a practitioner and expert. She's also served on the NSPRA board and is a past NSPRA president. And in our conversation here, she dives deep into vaulting her school district at the time into the early days of social media, all the way back in 2007 and 2008. Nicole is astute in understanding not just social media, but the difference between strategies and tactics, and how the tools we carry, whether it be social media or AI, can shape the positive impact our schools make. Here's her story. Fun full circle moment for our listeners. Nicole, you were president of NSPRA when I joined the organization. So you're like an iconic person for me.
I will tell you, I remember the person who was NSPRA president when I joined, Connie Blaney, at my first NSPRA which was in 2000 in San Antonio. And I was just talking to Connie about that. And so, yeah, there's something about, that first time and you first get to know this organization and who's involved with them.
Names and some folks and people in certain positions are always just going to be locked in for you now. That's the way it works. And today I really want to talk to you about the intersection of your work and experience in navigating social media. You have been tabbed by many folks as one of those, what we like to call early adopters. And I know you're a big advocate for that in the district you used to work for, and you continue to be a conduit of conversation around the importance of social media and school PR and the work that you do today. So talk to me a little bit. What were the early days of social media like at the intersection of your work in school PR and how you saw NSPRA supporting it?
When social media was very fresh and new, MySpace was bigger than Facebook at the time. There was a lot of discussion about whether this was scary, just like today in 2025, people are having conversations about AI and whether that is scary and how is that going to change the world and in particular for NSPRA, how is it going to change our profession? People were having that same tenor of conversation about social media at the time. And I was having conversations with the leadership in my district about those things. And there was some fear. Just like we're seeing today with AI, there was some fear about social media. And some of that's founded. I mean, let's look at the good and the bad that has come out of social media. Like, it's not, they weren't wrong. It's
healthy
pitfalls.
A little bit, right? If you've got a little bit of fear or apprehension lacing the larger conversations, maybe you're less likely to make a big mistake because you're moving too fast.
Like, be open to the thing that's new, especially if it's going to change the world with you or without you, is kind of the way I look at it. And that's how I was looking at it back then. The interesting thing about that conversation, I remember, I want to say it was 2007, a young person I knew got me onto Facebook. And I got, I realized this is cleaner and easier than MySpace. And I started seeing more brands and businesses joining Facebook at the time. More people were getting on this platform, that this was going to be an opportunity for school communications. And I think it's important to realize that at the same time as social media was ascending as a viable option, the traditional media was descending. So
interesting.
So when I started in my district in 1999, the Kansas City Star, major metropolitan newspaper, had bureaus in every neighborhood and area of the city. All the suburban areas had their own weekly insert, and sometimes twice weekly insert, depending on how big that suburb was. And so we had a reporter assigned to cover just my district, from the Star and from the there's a local newspaper company that has a weekly. They had a reporter that was assigned just to the schools in my county. I had two reporters whose job it was to cover education, mostly in my district. And they came to all the school board meetings. They were covering all the news that we had. And that was not to even mention the attention that we got from the TV news. But this was the tipping point, and which was interesting for me because I had come from newspaper journalism to this job in school communication. And right at this time, the corporate buyouts of these newspapers that was leading them to cut and cut and cut in was happening at the same time as they were losing money because advertising was going largely online. So that, like, as all these confluence of things were happening at the same time, they're cutting these reporters that were covering us. I'm getting less media coverage. And at the same time, now here's this platform that's ascending in importance, and more people are getting on it. And there was this sense that it's just young people who are on it. But that was starting to change a little bit at the time. And as I was pointing out to the senior leaders in my district, a lot of those people were parents. These were the young parents, and became more and more clear. And so as I pushed my superintendent, he was scared of social media.
I was gonna say I know a lot of principals in my district that still aren't big fans.
Right, right. But he was willing to give it a try. He trusted me, and I appreciate that, because we got to create a school district Facebook page before a lot of people had that. Because it was so early on, we were kind of figuring out, what does this look like, and what kind of a tool can it be? But it was clear that as we were losing one important opportunity to tell our story as a district, we were gaining another. And there's a nice amount of credibility with media coverage, because it's this outside source. Whereas with social media, while that's coming from the district, it is also interactive. So that also lends a little bit of credibility, because you're opening yourself up to that kind of two-way communication. And we just wanted to create a place where we could tell our own story. And that was really the thing that helped my senior leaders understand. Not too long after that, I had the opportunity to serve on the NSPRA board. And during that time, I also created a blog for NSPRA.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so there were a lot of people out there who were kind of afraid of social media and didn't really understand how it could be a good tool for school communications. And so, to help create a resource for how to use it and what it could look like, I started a blog for NSPRA, and had different people around the country who were doing a good job of using it in their districts contribute. Periodically, there would be articles from different people about what they were doing and how they were using it. And it was a good resource, was that people needed to start to realize that it's not a strategy, it's a tactic. And by that,
Bless
I mean,
you. Thank you. Yes, I was going to go down this rabbit hole eventually in this conversation. This is a big thing for me in my district.
Yes.
People hear me say this all the time. So yes, go. I'm here for this.
Yes. Well, and it was important, I think, once we got past that early adopter phase, where this is new and different, and just the idea of it is a thing in itself, to start to help people place it in its proper place in our toolkit. And to understand that just like your website is a tool, and just like your newsletter is a tool that you use for school communications, just like your relationships with the local media are a tool that you use, so too social media is a tool that you use to achieve the strategies that you set.
This is important for people to understand, right? Like the social media piece becomes this big shiny thing because everyone's on it. We're familiar with it. We like being creative with it. Well, most of us do. And like, it's this thing. It's like it's the elephant in the room, but it's not the be all end all. And so I'm going to potentially open up a can of worms with you, Nicole, and ask, how do you see AI generated content now influencing school PR? At least right now in 2025, it seems like that is probably something that we need to be grappling with a little bit more, if we're not already. So as an early adopter of social media, and as someone whose job is to consult with school districts across the country about the best way to strategically use social media, AI has entered the chat, so to speak.
I think that we've got to do the same thing with AI that we did with school PR, which is understand that in some ways it's going to change things, but at its core, it's just another tool. So be aware of the ways that it changes things, be aware of the ways that we need to be cautious about the potential pitfalls. Understand that some folks are going to be very concerned about things like whether or not it's harvested people's proprietary intellectual property, whether or not it's an environmental hazard. And at the same time, being aware of how it can make work more efficient. And I think that for people who decide that it's worth it to take advantage of those efficiencies, that they need to remember that it should be used for the things that can be automated to free humans up to do the things that can't be automated. And therefore, when we think about content for school communications, we need the content that comes from our school districts to feel human and authentic and personalized. And if you spend a little time with an AI content creator, you can tell there's a little bit of word salad in that. There's certain certain indicators that make it kind of clear that something came through an AI generation, and we just don't want people to have the sense that we're phoning it in. If it feels like our captions, our newsletter content, our videos, our images are not authentic, they lose credibility. And if we lose credibility, function and the power of school PR gets undermined.
I love this conversation, and I really do think this is so much of where we're going to be going.
Keeping tabs on what is the best tool helps us get back to our core function of making sure that we are supporting a good two-way relationship, good two-way communications with the stakeholders in our community. So which tools in our tool belt are most successful for the audiences that we're working with? And, as it shifts, this tool used to be for young people, and then it was for old people, and now some young people are getting back on it. Knowing those things helps us know which audiences that is a good tool for. As these things evolve, it's incumbent on us to understand how that evolution affects whether that's a valuable tool for us and for which audiences it's best.
Such a good word. Evolution is a good one to hold on to as well. That's what this is. This is something that it's been around for a while, but it doesn't look the same like it did even just a year ago. Nicole, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us. This has been great. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mitch. I enjoyed it.
My name is Carol Mackey. I retired as Director of Communications for the Kansas City, Kansas School District, and I was there 22 years, but I have a total of about 33 years in communications, public relations, long-range planning. I was with the Wichita School District for 8 years before the Kansas City, Kansas School District. And then when I retired, I went to work in communications for the Archdiocese of Kansas City and Kansas.
Carol Mackey built a career out of the rising technology known as cable TV. In his 33-year career in public relations, he found himself leading early efforts in the 1980s of bringing cable TV storytelling to school districts in Kansas. As a former broadcaster for 10 years, he saw an opportunity for schools to make a bigger impact in the effort of building trust through the tool of TV, radio, and more, and then was a leading advocate in bringing those resources to NSPRA members. And through it all, he still holds on to the common truth that drives so much creative work today. Change is hard, but change, when done well, can vault you into new eras of progress if you bring your people along with you. Here's his story. So you've worn a lot of hats, but you definitely know what it's like to be in the chair of communications, public relations, and building trust within the community. Specifically, we really wanted to get your expertise on the intersection of cable TV and the rise of that medium and how it connects to NSPRA and school PR. And I know before we were recording, you said that you also was working in broadcast journalism as well. So that feels like a natural through line. So talk to me from your experience, in the 80s especially. What were the early days of cable TV like at the intersection of school PR?
I think I was very fortunate to go to work for the Wichita School District because they really had a unique operating procedure, I guess. They, with the cable provider, they had cable channels that they worked with, and through the Instructional Media Center, they had a full-blown production facility. And
Wow.
of course, like many places, they had the Board of Education meetings on cable.
Hmm.
We did with a number of things through IMC. The communications office wasn't the only one who was doing this. The IRMC, or Instructional Media Center, was producing a lot of different programs, if you will, to help instruction. Our particular one, we did and hosted, produced a BOE preview program, and it aired twice. And, I had a member of the board, school staff member, to explain what was going on with some instructional program or something new that was happening in the district. That was a 30-minute program. And of course, being cable, they aired it, even though it said twice monthly when we did the program, they aired it a whole bunch of times, and then did a news brief, weekly current activities in the schools. We did that. There were research reports that were done. VOTEC Times was another program through the Vocational Technical School that they had an interview program about what's going on at the VOTEC. Of course, as I mentioned, the Board of Education meetings were broadcast. We had public service announcements, administrative messages too, community messages. And especially when school was closing for bad weather, they would use the cable outlet too. So
The ability to build trust with community folks, especially folks who weren't family members, was that something that you saw as a big positive there?
it's another tool for the communications or public relations professional to use to reach the community as well as staff.
Talk to me a little bit about what was it like to bring that then to Kansas City when you moved there, and they don't have that setup. I'm assuming that was a big focus for you.
And in addition to cable, then in the KCK district, we also had a 30-minute radio program that we produced each week.
Mm-hmm.
And it was aired on, if I remember right, about 3 radio stations, which they used as public service, and so it didn't cost the district anything, but it aired like at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday.
But you still got the half hour of airwaves. So there you go.
It might have aired later than that, 6 o'clock. But anyway, it was public service time, which the school district had. So the district was interested in using cable, and the Kansas City, Kansas Community College did have a production facility, and they had a cable channel allocated. So we worked closely with the Kansas City, Kansas Community College to set up a similar program like I had in Wichita, where we had a 30-minute program where the Board of Education member was on at first to talk about what they were doing as a board. Mm-hmm. And then we had a feature of a staff member, a principal, you name it, on to talk about an instructional program or something new that was going to take place in the district.
So this is huge. And I mean, what's really cool for me is to hear you talk about this as this being, an early strategic endeavor for the work that you're doing, because obviously this is part of our everyday now in 2025. But it's really cool to hear this talking about what are the opportunities to say, like, getting a school board member to share about here is the process of the school district, or getting to share on a half-hour radio station that you get on a regular clip to say, here's what we're doing for curriculum. That had to have been big for establishing trust in the community.
I believe it's a factor, yes. Yeah, and you made a good point. Again, it's not only reaching the community, but it's reaching your staff, your teachers, your custodians, your food service workers, everybody. So.
Absolutely. And so, thinking about NSPRA's involvement in this, because I know that you were intimately familiar with the NSPRA organization during your time in school PR as well. So, how did you see NSPRA responding to these growing trends or providing support?
Well, certainly in the regional conferences or the national conferences, there were presentations on how to use cable, how to use the digital, the website and all that stuff. Over time, and I can't remember now if it was regional or national, I did a couple of presentations on using using cable. So, it certainly was a topic that was on the agenda for NSPRA's regional meetings as well as their national meeting.
Well, I know NSPRA told me that they featured your work in an early '80s edition of their newsletter about cable TV, and then knowing that that's just the early stages.
Adaptability is crucial. You've got to have a long range plan and be able to modify that as you go along so you're meeting your goals. And change isn't easy.
No.
People put up roadblocks, and I probably have too in the past, but change is not easy.
It's not. That's such a good reminder, and a reminder too about one of the most important components of the work that we do, I think, is recognizing that change is and can be difficult, but that if done well, if done with empathy, if done with truth, that having the right people in leadership, you can usher people through the experience of change in a way that can make things better.
And with that, got to include other people in anything you develop.
That the collaboration and the buy-in and helping everyone feel like they are a part of the good work that is taking place. That's everything. You
said it better than I did, yes.
Well, thank you so much, Carol, for being here with us, and for, more importantly, for the way that you have influenced the work of school public relations for the better. You are definitely an influencer, so thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andy Grunig, APR. I'm a communications specialist at the Fairfax County Public Schools in Falls Church, Virginia, and we are a suburb of Washington, D.C., and we have about 183,000 students, roughly 25,000 full-time staff members.
Andy Grunig, APR, knows the importance of building trust by being available. He also understands better than many the Wild West of the early internet days. Throughout his 11-and-a-half-year career in school communications, Andy has been a consistent voice of leaning into the positive opportunities of technology and websites. As a former NSPRA staffer, he helped build the first association's website, and since then has been an influencer in school web spaces. Now serving as a comms pro at Fairfax County Public Schools, he's quick to remind folks that technology changes rapidly, but the basics of storytelling stay the same. Here's his story. We're going back in time. We're going to jump into our time machines here, and we're talking about big moments where technology influenced school PR. And particularly, you've got some unique experience and knowledge about the early days of the internet and the intersection of that at school PR and NSPRA. So tell me, what happened in 1998? What big project were you a part of then here?
Yeah, so I was the lead on the first NSPRA website. Like you said, this is back in the early days of the internet and websites, and kind of took a wait and see approach just to kind of learn some best practices and get a good idea of what other associations were doing before we embarked on our project.
How did you end up as a point person in this project?
So at the time, NSPRA was pretty small. We had 6 people. I was one of the younger staff members. And Rich Bagan was the executive director at the time. I think my title was maybe also communication specialist. So I think maybe it was manager of Communications at that time, but it was kind of like, well, let's let the young guy take this project on.
Well, and you're also kind of figuring it out along the way, right? It wasn't like internet web space. Your web home was a big cornerstone of the job probably when you got there. You're figuring it out as it becomes a opportunity or disruptor, however you want to look at it in the
hmm
industry.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to take it on because you know, I looked at it as a project to have on my resume because obviously websites were just getting rolling, but that was going to be something that was going to be big for a long time.
Just has that feeling of like, okay, this is going to have some staying power. So let's figure this out. Talk to me about the early look, right? Obviously, Inspro was like, we've got to have a website, we've got to have an online home where people can find us, get
hmm
resources and information. So how did you start from scratch? Like, how did you take all of this and figure out like what do we want this online home to be like? Yep.
Anspro used to be in Arlington, Virginia, and we moved to Rockville in 1997. And so, we got a new building and new phone system on all this. And the phone system had this ability to create basically, I can't remember the exact name we called it, but we called it like a fax news service. And you could upload, and this is all old school way to do it. You could upload paper documents and create different channels. So basically, you would call up, and it was 24 hours. So if somebody called up, there was a number and it kind of like voicemail, and would say, if you have arranged the NSPRA fax news service for membership information, press 1. For job openings, press 2, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of had some structure to it of over the years of what members had called in for that we had no way to give them other than just by putting it in the mail. And I kind of based the website structure on that of, having been there for a while, seeing what the most requested information was. So, we had the public part where you say like if you want to become a member or if you want to register for the conference or if you wanted to buy and then we had the member only section where you had to have your username and password, and that had a lot of like the resources, and we would put newsletter articles in there, and that's where like the job listings were, like a message board. Yeah, it was like so like if you had an issue, like I have a question about this. You can go on there and post your question, and people will. This is for members, and you can go in there and a member would hopefully reply to your question. For the look, obviously, we had the Inspro logo.
So there are a couple of things that you mentioned in there that I thought were particularly interesting in the work that we do, right? So early days of internet, the online home literally does not exist, but there's still some insight and research that you have access to be able to follow the RPI model, right? Even if
Correct.
it is the call in and you're like, these are the questions we're answering, you can still be informed by that early data for something that you haven't built yet.
The informal research of just taking phone calls, because back then, the Inspro, six people, if the phone rang and it got to the second or third ring, we had to answer it. So anybody could take a question and you say we get a question, I want to become a member. How do I do that? Or, or I need information on crisis communications. Can you help me? And I think they still have the old school paper files back in Inspro office where, we used to literally go look at the files and, say it's crisis and go under C and select, what do we have? And we would literally fax it to people because it was either that or mail. And most people, they got a question, they need it right away.
And so you were telling me earlier before we hit record, you had this graphic, like this great cutting edge 1998 style graphic on the homepage.
Yeah, that's right. It was the old Inspro logo, and it would start out small, and it would become big, and then say National School Public Relations Association, the later School Communications.
I love it.
And you say we were talking about the Wayback Machine. If you can get the Wayback Machine to work, you might be able to get a good view of what it looked like.
I was gonna say that's a time capsule. I'm gonna need like a GIF of that. So I'm gonna use the Wayback Machine and see what I can find.
Yeah. So I mean, for a few years was super cool. You're like, oh man, this is awesome. But then after a while, when people get a little more internet savvy, and it would take, I don't know, 20 seconds to load.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I don't think we need this anymore.
Again, the things that you adapt to along the way. And I think that's one of the things that's fascinating to me as we talk about different kind of like disruptive resources and technology opportunities is it's not just this thing is here, but also the fast-paced evolution of everything. So what would you say, in what ways has online access been a challenge and an opportunity for the work of school public relations?
Yeah, so obviously the opportunities are, communication is instant. You can share urgent updates and routine news in real time. The reach is infinite. You can reach current families, but alumni, no matter where they are, prospective families that are considering moving to your district. It's also a way for two-way engagement. Obviously,
Yes.
Parents can.
I think the two-way piece is huge, and almost to a point where, like, I don't know, sometimes for me, sometimes it's easy to forget that like that is internet, so much of that is internet based, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not just on the website, it's the email, it's the social media, it's all that stuff. Like before then it was, you got to go to the school in person or you've got to call on the telephone. And that two-way piece that's a game changer.
For sure. And also, before online, a lot of people would get their information from word of mouth.
Yeah.
And, as it's not always accurate because
right.
that could be a challenge. But yeah, so, I mean, in terms of website challenges, misinformation is all over the internet. People believe what they see it, on various news sites,
Right.
which cannot, sometimes, as we know, is not always accurate. So it's a challenge to respond to that all the time.
The importance of being adaptable in school public relations. And I know that that's something that NSPRA has worked to be at the forefront of supporting as well for its 90 years. From your perspective, Andy, with everything that you've seen, why is being adaptable important in school PR, especially when it comes to technology?
Schools operate in fast changing environments and communication needs can shift very quickly. The audience in Fairfax in 2025 is a different audience than it was when I started 20 years ago. And different types of families, different communication needs. So you have to adapt to the needs of your audiences.
Absolutely. That's the name of the game right there. Helping your audiences get their needs met, building trust, all of that. When you reflect on what you've seen in the industry and also your time working with the NSPRA team, what stands out to you in terms of just how NSPRA continues to connect and support and lead the way through school PR work?
What I always say to people, because I've been going to the conference since 1994, maybe 20 times. What I always say is the technologies change, but the basics remain the same. RPI is still the gold standard for coming up with information and getting it out to people, but the technologies over the years are different. Like I said, once it used to be print, and then there was fax machines, and then there was websites, and then there was social media, and then there was, email newsletters along there, and now AI is coming out. It's just being able to figure out how members can use these technologies to best serve their families and employees and communities.
That's it. That's everything. How can we leverage the technology to better take care of our people? That's how we do, why we do it. The tools have come and gone, but the values stay the same. Clarity, connection, trust, all of it rooted in our work of seeking to strengthen school communities through communication. It's all evolution. The work of school public relations has evolved incredibly through the last 90 years. And the work continues to evolve ever rapidly as we vault into the next 90 years. And through it all, NSPRA has been a conduit of innovation and strategy at the intersection of communication tools that we have carried and continue to carry. So we salute NSPRA for celebrating the creativity and adaptability of school communicators, both past and present. And next week, we'll look at school PR in moments of crisis, from Columbine to COVID, and how NSPRA became a steadying voice for communicators when it mattered most.
The Stories That Shaped Us is a limited series podcast by the National School Public Relations Association, produced in celebration of NSPRA's 90th anniversary. Special thanks goes out to host and producer Mitchell Rausch, executive producer Sarah Laughlin, NSPRA Executive Director Barbara Hunter, APR, and you, our 2,900 plus NSPRA members. Be sure to visit nspra.org for membership information, professional development resources, and more. Thank you for listening to The Stories That Shaped Us.